They say time heals all wounds. But that's a lie. Some wounds never heal. They stay buried deep, poisoning you from the inside, until one day you realize the only way to find peace is through fire. My name isn't important. What matters is the story I'm about to tell you, a story of love, of betrayal, and the kind of revenge that changes everything. For years, I carried this secret, pretending that life was fine, that I had moved on. But the truth? I never moved on. I had the perfect life, or so I thought. A partner I trusted, friends I considered family, a future I believed was solid. But behind closed doors, while I was blinded by love and loyalty, they were already tearing my world apart. When I finally uncovered the truth, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was a knife to the chest, twisted with a smile. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The man I used to be, the one who forgave, who trusted, who believed in second chances, he died that night. What was left of me wasn't interested in healing. What was left of me wanted justice. No. Not justice, revenge. And this is how it all happened. Before everything fell apart, my life looked like something out of a storybook. I wasn't rich, but I had enough. I wasn't famous, but I was respected. And most importantly, believed I had loved, the kind of love that makes you think you finally found your home in another person. Her name was Emily. She had a smile that could light up a room, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn their heads, and a way of making me feel like I was the only man in the world who mattered. We met in college, back when life was simpler, when dreams still felt unbreakable. From the very beginning, she was the center of my world. By the time this story begins, we had been together for nearly 10 years. 10 years of holidays, vacations, late-night talks, and promises whispered in the dark. I built my life around her. Every plan I made, every step I took, was with Emily in mind. We lived in a small but cozy house just outside the city. I had a steady job managing a mid-sized construction company, and Emily worked as a graphic designer. Our days blended into a comfortable rhythm: coffee in the mornings, long drives on weekends, movie nights on Fridays. To anyone on the outside, we were the couple everyone envied. And honestly, I envied myself sometimes, because I thought I had it all. One evening stands out in my memory. It was our anniversary, and I had gone all out. I cooked dinner, lit candles, even bought her the necklace she had been eyeing for months. She walked into the room, saw everything I'd done, and her eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you," she whispered, hugging me so tightly, I thought she'd never let go. I kissed her forehead and told her the truth. "No, Emily, I don't deserve you." We sat down, ate, laughed, and for a moment, I believed life couldn't get any better. I believed the future I dreamed of, marriage, children, a lifetime together, was just around the corner. But the thing about perfect beginnings is that they blind you. You don't see the cracks forming until it's too late. Looking back now, there were signs. Times when she seemed distant, when her phone became a little too important, when she claimed to be working late more often than usual. But I ignored them. I told myself, everyone gets busy. Everyone drifts a little sometimes, because love makes you blind. And I was completely blind. That time, I couldn't imagine a world where Emily wasn't faithful, where she wasn't the woman I believed her to be. I trusted her with everything: my heart, my future, every identity. But trust is the easiest thing to give and the hardest thing to recover once it's broken. And soon, I was going to learn that the perfect life I thought I had was nothing more than a carefully built illusion. The kind of illusion that shatters in a single moment. At first, it was little things, tiny, almost invisible details that most people would overlook. But when you love someone as deeply as I loved Emily, you notice everything, even when you pretend not to. The first time I felt it was on a Thursday night. She said she had to stay late at work because of a new client project. Normally, that wasn't unusual. Her job sometimes required long hours. But that night, when she finally came home, she was different. Her hair was a little messy, her cheeks flushed, and she carried a faint smell of cologne that wasn't mine. "Rough day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she said quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Long meetings. I'm exhausted." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. At least, I told myself I did. But something in her tone, in the way she rushed past me to the shower, gnawed at me. From that night forward, I started noticing patterns. Her phone, once left carelessly on the couch or nightstand, was now always face down. Notifications that used to light up her screen suddenly disappeared, silenced. She guarded that device like it was a lifeline, carrying it into the bathroom, even keeping it under her pillow at night. Then there were the late nights. Once or twice a month became once or twice a week. Work projects, she said. Deadlines, she insisted. And each time, I forced myself to smile, to nod, to let her walk out the door with the kiss on the cheek while my gut screamed at me that something was wrong. I remember sitting in our living room one night, staring at the clock as it ticked past midnight. Emily still wasn't home. I called her, and after a few rings she answered, whispering, "I'm still at the office," she said. "Don't wait up." But in the background, I didn't hear the hum of computers or the quiet buzz of a late-night workplace. I heard music, faint but unmistakable. A song playing in some bar or restaurant. "Office must be fun tonight," I joked, trying to mask the suspicion in my voice. There was a pause. "Yeah, the team needed a break," she replied quickly before hanging up. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at her empty chair across from me, and for the first time, doubt began to drown out love. Still, I tried to push it away. She was my Emily, my partner, my everything. If I accused her without proof, I'd look paranoid, insecure. And if I was wrong, I'd hurt the very person I was supposed to protect. So swallowed it. I buried my doubts under layers of forced smiles and hopeful thoughts. But the universe has a cruel way of revealing the truth. One Saturday afternoon, Emily said she was going shopping with a friend. Hours later, drove into town to pick up some supplies for a project. And that's when I saw her. She wasn't with her friend. She wasn't even near the shopping district. She was sitting in a cafe, leaning across the table, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. And across from her was a man I had never seen before. His hand brushed against hers, and she didn't pull away. I froze in my car, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would shatter my ribs. 1,000 excuses flashed through my mind. Maybe he was a coworker. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew this was the beginning of the end. I drove home that day in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. And for the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than love. I felt suspicion, and suspicion, once it takes root, never lets go. After that day in the cafe, something inside me shifted. I could no longer pretend. I could no longer convince myself that Emily's excuses were harmless or that I was just imagining things. I needed the truth, cold, undeniable, brutal truth. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started watching her. At first, it was subtle. When she left her phone on the counter, I'd glance at her notifications, hoping to see something ordinary: work messages, reminders, family texts. But instead, I noticed locked conversations, names I didn't recognize, messages deleted before I could even glimpse them. Then I checked her calendar on the fridge. She had marked meetings and work nights in bold ink. But when I called her office under the pretense of dropping something off, her coworkers sounded confused. "She left hours ago," one of them said casually. "Hours ago? That was the night she told me she'd be at the office until midnight." My stomach twisted, my chest tight. The lies were no longer shadows, they were right there, in the open. But still, I needed proof. I couldn't confront her with suspicions alone. I needed something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I made a decision. A dark, heavy decision that felt like betrayal of my own. But what choice did I have? I followed her. The first time, stayed far behind, my car blending into the traffic. She left the office earlier than usual, but instead of heading home, she drove to a part of the city we never visited. A quieter neighborhood, dimly lit streets, the kind of place where secrets thrived. I watched as she parked in front of an apartment complex. My hands shook on the steering wheel as she stepped out, adjusting her hair in the reflection of her car window. And then, as if I wasn't even real anymore, She walked confidently toward the entrance, straight into the arms of the same man I'd seen at the cafe. He kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. Not a polite brush of lips. A kiss full of hunger, full of intimacy. A kiss that belonged to me once, but now belonged to him. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred with rage and heartbreak. She laughed as he took her hand and led her inside. For nearly an hour, I sat in my car, paralyzed. My world, the world I thought I knew, had collapsed in front of me. Every memory, every promise, every whispered, "I love you," replayed in my mind, twisted and corrupted by the image of her lips on his. When she finally returned home that night, she smiled at me, tired but sweet. She leaned down, kissed me on the cheek, and whispered, "Long night. I'm going to shower." I stared at her, my chest burning, the lye still dripping from her lips like poison. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I forced a smile, because now, I knew. I had the truth I'd been searching for, and with that truth came a darkness I'd never felt before. As she disappeared into the bathroom, humming softly to herself, I whispered words she couldn't hear. "You have no idea what you've just done." It wasn't a threat yet. It wasn't even a plan. But it was the spark of something dangerous, something unstoppable. Because betrayal is a wound that doesn't heal. And in that moment, I stopped being her partner. I started becoming something else. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe Emily really was just overworked, that the man I saw at the cafe was a colleague, or even just a friend. Love does strange things to the mind. It makes you blind, it makes you forgive, it makes you lie to yourself just to avoid the pain of the obvious. But lies, they have a way of piling up, and sooner or later, they crush you. One evening, when Emily left for yet another meeting, I sat alone in the living room staring at the empty wine glass she'd left behind. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore, half in love, half in suspicion. I needed the truth. Real, undeniable truth. That's when I decided to follow her. I waited 15 minutes after she left, giving her enough time to feel safe. And then I slipped out into the night. My car stayed several lengths behind hers, my headlights dimmed, my heart pounding like a war drum. I felt like a stranger in my own life, sneaking, hiding, stalking the woman I once trusted with everything. She drove across town, far from her office, into an area barely recognized. Quiet streets, few lights, the kind of place where no one would notice if something dark happened. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a modest apartment building. I killed my engine, watching as she stepped out of her car, her face glowing in the streetlight. She checked her phone quickly, smiling at a message, before looking up. And then, he appeared, the same man from the cafe. Tall, confident, his smile wide, as if he had been waiting for her all day. She didn't hesitate. She didn't glance around to see if anyone was watching. She went straight into his arms, and they kissed. Long, passionate, hungry. The kind of kiss that once belonged to me, but had clearly been his for some time now. My chest burned. My throat tightened until I could hardly breathe. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. All the nights I sat alone, waiting for her, while she was here, with him, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I imagined storming out of the car, dragging her away from him, demanding answers right there on the street. But I didn't move. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew this wasn't the time. I had to think. I had to plan. She disappeared inside with him, hand in hand, laughing at something he whispered in her ear. I stayed in that car for what felt like hours, staring at the glowing windows of the building, imagining what was happening behind them. Every second carved another scar into my soul. When she finally came home that night, her hair slightly out of place, her smile forced, she leaned in to kiss me as if nothing had happened. "Long night," she whispered, setting down her purse. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to throw the truth in her face, to shatter the fragile mask she wore. But instead, I just stared at her, silent. She walked past me, humming softly, heading straight for the shower. And that's when the anger hardened into something colder, something far more dangerous than rage. I realized that night that love was dead. and in its place, something else had been born, a hunger, a need for justice, a plan for revenge, because Emily thought she could lie to me forever. She thought she could live to lives without consequences. But she was wrong, dead wrong. The night I saw Emily in his arms changed me forever. Before that, there had always been a part of me still clinging to hope, still whispering that maybe I was wrong, maybe I misunderstood. But after that night, there were no more illusions left, and yet, I didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid of the truth, I already had it, but because I realized something more dangerous, more powerful. If I lashed out now, if I screamed, accused, demanded answers, she would only deny it, twist it, maybe even leave. And if she left, I'd lose my chance to make her pay. So instead, I smiled. I laughed at her jokes. I kissed her goodnight. I played the role of the perfect partner, while inside me, something dark was growing, spreading like fire through dry wood. That was the breaking point, not the night I saw her cheat, but the night I chose silence over truth. The night I decided to bide my time. I became an observer in my own home. Every movement, every look, every word she spoke, I studied them all. The way she checked her phone under the table, the way her excuses came faster now, less polished, the way she flinched when I asked a casual question, as though guilt had sharpened her nerves. She didn't know it, but she was teaching me everything I needed to know. One evening, she left her purse on the couch while she ran upstairs. For months, she had guarded it like it contained state secrets. But this time, she slipped. I opened it. Inside, I found a second phone. My hands trembled as I turned it on, the glow of the screen illuminating the truth I already knew, but still feared to face. Messages, dozens of them. Long, sweet, intimate conversations between her and him. Plans to meet. Jokes they shared. Pictures I'll never be able to forget. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone against the wall. I just read. Every word. Every detail. Until I understood them both, who he was, where he lived, how long this had been going on. And that's when the plan began to take shape. It wasn't enough to simply expose her, to ruin her reputation, or to walk away. That would have been too easy for her, too merciful. No, what I wanted was deeper, darker. I wanted her to feel what I felt, to know what it was like to be deceived, betrayed, destroyed from the inside out. I wanted her to look at me one day and realize she had created her own downfall. The next few weeks, I prepared in silence. I researched him, this man who thought he could steal what was mine. I learned his routines, his weaknesses. I tracked Emily's lies, matching them against his schedule until the puzzle fit perfectly. Every day acted the same at home, loving, gentle, calm. She never suspected that the man sitting across from her at the dinner table was no longer her partner. He was her executioner. The hardest part wasn't hiding my anger. It was hiding my anticipation. Every time she kissed me goodbye, thinking she was walking freely into her little fantasy life, I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing, because she had no idea what was coming, and when it finally came, it wouldn't be quick. It would be slow, painful, perfect. That was the breaking point. Not her betrayal, not the lies, but the moment I decided to stop being a victim and start being her reckoning. And from that moment forward, there was no turning back. From the outside, nothing had changed. Emily still kissed me goodbye each morning, still sent me the occasional text during the day, still laughed at my jokes when we sat together in the evenings. To anyone else, we looked like the perfect couple, but beneath that facade, a silent war had already begun. The first rule of revenge is patience. If you strike too soon, the satisfaction dies quickly. No, I wanted this to be slow, meticulous, precise. I wanted every step she took to feel solid until the ground gave way beneath her. So I started small. I memorized her routines, not as a husband, but as a hunter. I knew what time she left for work, which days she stayed late, and how long it took her to get home. I knew when she was with him. At first, I used this knowledge only to observe, to test how predictable she was. But soon, I began to use it against her. One evening, She left her phone unattended while she showered. I slipped into her second phone again, scanning through her conversations with him. That's when I noticed something, a detail she hadn't told him yet. She had lied to him too. She told him she was free on nights when she was actually home with me. She told him she was working late when she was out with friends. Even in her new life, she was weaving lies. That's when I realized she wasn't just betraying me, she was betraying him too. And that knowledge became my weapon. The next week, when she told me she had to leave for a late night meet, I nodded, kissed her on the cheek, and let her walk out the door. 10 minutes later, I sent him a message from her second phone. Running late. Don't wait up. Then I drove to his neighborhood and parked down the street, watching as he waited outside his building, checking his watch, his phone, pacing back and forth like a man desperate for her arrival. But she never came. He finally went back inside. Frustrated, I smiled in the darkness of my car. The seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I played this game again and again, canceling their meetings, changing small details in her messages, making him wait, making him wonder, making him question if she was truly his. And all the while, Emily had no idea. At home, she carried on as usual. She'd come back late, her hair messy, her excuses thinner than ever, and I'd simply smile, pretending to believe every word. But in my silence, I was dismantling her other life piece by piece. And I wasn't done. I began to leave subtle traces behind. A faint cologne on her clothes that wasn't his. A lipstick smudge on a coffee cup she hadn't used. Little inconsistencies she couldn't explain, even to herself. Soon, she started to look nervous, distracted. She'd glance at her phone more often, frown when she read his messages, retreat into silence as though the walls were closing in. That was when I knew my silent war was working. She thought she was in control of the game. She thought she was the one weaving lies and living two lives. But in reality, she was dancing to my tune. And the best part, she didn't even know the war had started. At first, the changes were subtle. A delayed text, a missed call. Emily would come home looking flustered, her lips tight, her smile forced. She still played her role well, but I could see the small fractures forming in the mask she wore so carefully. And then, one night, I heard it. She was in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in a voice she thought was quiet enough that I couldn't hear. But I was listening. "Why are you acting like this?" she hissed, her tone sharp, almost desperate. "I told you I was busy." A pause, then her voice again, angrier this time. "Don't start with me, okay? You're not the only one in my life who needs attention." I smiled to myself in the darkness of the living room. The cracks were growing. She stormed upstairs after the call, slamming the bedroom door, muttering curses under her breath. When I followed a few minutes later, she was already in bed, facing the wall, pretending to be asleep. The silent war was working. Every day that passed, he trusted her less. Every time I adjusted her messages, every time I canceled a meeting, every time I planted some small doubt, his patience were thinner. And in return, her lies grew clumsier, her nerves stretched thinner. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to test just how fragile their relationship had become. She told me she was meeting her friend Jessica for brunch. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and watched as she drove off. But instead of letting her go, I followed. She parked near the same cafe where I had first seen them together. Only this time, when he showed up, I was already there sitting across the street in my car, watching. From where I sat, I could see everything. He looked tense, his arms crossed, his body stiff. She tried to smile, to charm him, but he wasn't buying it. His hand slammed against the table once, his words sharp and accusing. She leaned forward, pleading, her eyes wide with fear, not love. Whatever doubt I had about my plan melted away in that moment. He was unraveling her world for me. I didn't even have to intervene. After 20 minutes, he stood up, shaking his head, and walked away. She chased after him for a few steps, calling his name, but he didn't stop. Finally, she sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. I had never seen her look so small. When she came home that evening, she was unusually quiet. No excuses, no fake smiles. She moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, her phone clutched in her hand, as though it was both the cause of and the solution to her pain. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, watching her crumble from the inside out. That night, lying beside her in bed, I listened to her breathing, shallow, uneven, restless. The first cracks had appeared. And once cracks form, it's only a matter of time before the entire structure collapses. I turned my head, watching her silhouette in the moonlight, and whispered silently to myself, "This is just the beginning." By the time the cracks began to show, Emily was a different person. The confidence she once carried had drained away, leaving only restlessness. She jumped at small noises. She stared at her phone with nervous eyes, typing furiously, then deleting, then typing again. But the thing about living two lives is that eventually, they collide. And when they do, there's no way to keep the wreckage hidden. It started on a Tuesday. She was supposed to be at work late. She even kissed me goodbye with her usual, "Don't wait up" smile. But less than an hour later, my phone rang. It was Jessica, her real friend Jessica. "Hey," she said casually. "Is Emily with you? She was supposed to meet me tonight, but she never showed." For a moment, I just sat there, silent, savoring the delicious irony. Emily's lies were beginning to eat each other alive. "No," I said calmly. "She told me she had to stay late at work." Jessica hesitated. "That's strange. She asked me to cover for her with you." I didn't think anything of it, but, "Is everything okay?" I reassured Jessica with a practiced laugh. But inside, I felt triumphant. Emily's web was unraveling, thread by thread. When she came home later that night, her story was sloppy. Something about a last-minute project. Her boss keeping her late. She didn't notice how I tilted my head, watching her, memorizing every word, every nervous twitch of her lips, because I already knew the truth. She had been with him, and for once, her lies had betrayed her, not me. The next few weeks, it only got worse. She began to slip, forgetting which excuse she had given me, mixing up names, fumbling when I asked simple questions. Sometimes she'd mention Jessica, not realizing I had already spoken to her. Other times, she'd talk about being exhausted from work on days she had supposedly taken off. Her lies were colliding, crashing into each other like cars in a storm, leaving wreckage scattered across her life. And I just let it happen. One Friday, I decided to push her further. I asked if she wanted to go away for the weekend, just the two of us. Her face froze for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "Oh, honey, I wish I could," she said. "But I promised Jessica I'd help her move this weekend." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But I already knew. Jessica was out of town visiting her parents. Saturday night, Emily came home late again. Her hair smelled faintly of someone else's cologne, her lips raw from kisses that weren't mine. She tried to sneak upstairs quietly, thinking I was asleep, but I was waiting. I didn't say anything, just watched her from the shadows of the living room. And for the first time, I saw something in her eyes as she passed me in the dark. Fear. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know how much I'd seen, how much I'd uncovered, but she sensed it the way predators sense danger before it strikes. The lies were no longer her shield. They were her prison, closing in around her, and I was the one tightening the walls. Why now? Emily was no longer the radiant, confident woman I once knew. She was restless, paranoid, her nerves fraying like a rope about to snap. She tried to maintain her act, but the mask she wore was slipping. Every smile looked forced. Every excuse sounded hollow. Her second life, the one she had built so carefully, was collapsing under the weight of its own lies. And I was there to watch every piece crumble. It began with him. The man she betrayed me with had started to drift away. I could see it in her messages, the ones I continued to read behind her back. His tone was shorter now, more impatient. He accused her of lying, of playing games. "You're always busy," one text read. "If you wanted this, you'd make time. You seeing someone else? Be honest with me, Emily." I almost laughed when I read those words. He was beginning to feel what I had felt for months, the doubt, the suspicion, the anger. He was learning that Emily was not the perfect woman he thought she was, but a liar who spun webs until she was caught in them herself, and she was desperate to keep him. Her replies were frantic, pleading, filled with apologies and promises. But the more she begged, the colder he became. Their fairy tale romance was rotting from the inside, and she couldn't stop it. At home, she was no better. She'd sit across from me at dinner, her fork trembling in her hand, her eyes darting away whenever I looked at her too long. Sometimes she'd touch her phone, then quickly pull her hand back as if afraid I might notice. She was afraid. She didn't know what I knew, but she felt it. She felt the walls closing in, the lies pressing down on her. One night, she broke. It was past midnight when she stumbled into the bedroom, tears streaking her face. She thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I lay still, breathing evenly, while she collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered into the darkness. "I can't lose both of them. Both of them." She said it out loud. The words hit me like a spark to gasoline. My suspicions, my observations, my patience, it had all led to this. Now, there was no denying it. No excuses. No lies strong enough to hide the truth. She was trapped, her lover slipping away, her husband silently watching, and her double life crumbling into dust. I turned my head slightly, just enough to watch her from the shadows. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, her hands gripping the sheets so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a brief second, I felt something I hadn't in months: pity. She looked so small, so broken, so human. But pity is a weakness, and I wasn't weak anymore. The collapse was here, and soon, she would see the full extent of what it meant to betray me. Because I wasn't going to confront her with words, I wasn't going to scream, or cry, or beg for the truth. No, I had something else in mind, something far more devastating, something that would ensure she could never escape the ruins of the life she had built on lies. I closed my eyes, letting her think I was still asleep, while inside my mind, the pieces of my plan locked perfectly into place. The time for silence was ending. The time for action had come. The morning after her midnight breakdown, Emily tried to wear her usual mask again. She plastered on a smile, cooked breakfast, and even hummed softly in the kitchen. But her eyes betrayed her. They were red, swollen, and restless. She was a performer who knew the audience wasn't buying it anymore. And I, the silent spectator, decided it was time to step onto the stage. The trap had to be delicate, precise. If I pushed too hard, she might retreat into silence, deny everything, or worse, run. No, I needed her to walk willingly into the cage I was building around her. I began with kindness. That morning, I placed a steaming cup of coffee by her side, just the way she liked it: 2 sugars, no cream. I kissed her cheek and told her she looked beautiful. The surprise in her eyes was unmistakable. She hadn't expected tenderness. "Not now, thank you," she whispered, her voice almost trembling. Throughout the day, I continued my performance. I texted her sweet little notes, sent her flowers at work, and even planned a dinner date at the restaurant where we had our first anniversary. She was caught off guard, torn between guilt and hope, and that's exactly what I wanted, because while I was tightening the noose, she was loosening her guard. At dinner, as she nervously sipped her wine, I leaned across the table and asked, "Are you happy, Emily?" The question froze her. She looked at me like a deer in headlights. "Yes, of course," she answered too quickly. "Why wouldn't I be?" Her smile was tight, her hands fidgeting with the napkin. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept her lie, then reached for her hand. "That's all I want, for you to be happy." She blinked, caught between relief and unease. She didn't know that while I held her hand across the table, her lover was staring at his phone, reading the carefully crafted messages I had sent from a cloned number. Messages that made him believe she was playing him, mocking him. He was already angry. Soon, he'd be furious. Piece by piece, I was dismantling her world. At home, I continued to act as though nothing was wrong. I listened to her stories, laughed at her jokes, and even surprised her with the weekend trip idea. She began to relax, to believe that maybe her late-night sobs hadn't been heard, that maybe I was still the clueless husband she needed me to be. But the cracks were widening. Her phone buzzed more often now, and each time she glanced at it, her face paled. She hid in the bathroom longer, typing frantically. When she returned, Her smile was thinner, her laughter strained. I pretended not to notice. Instead, I laid the groundwork for the final stage of my trap. I began dropping subtle hints in conversation, little reminders of loyalty, honesty, and betrayal. You know, I said one evening as we watched TV, lies always have a way of coming to light, no matter how well they're hidden. Her body stiffened beside me. She forced a laugh. That's dramatic. I replied calmly. But it's true. I didn't look at her when I said it. I didn't need to. I could feel her panic filling the room like smoke. That night, she barely slept. She tossed and turned, whispering excuses to herself, maybe even rehearsing the lies she thought she might need. And while she drifted in and out of restless dreams, I was wide awake, sharpening the final blade of my revenge. Because the trap wasn't just about exposing her. It was about destroying the illusion she thought she could control. She believed she had choices left. She believed she could balance her lies, but soon, she would discover that the stage she was performing on had no exits, only a spotlight, and everyone would see her for what she truly was. The cracks in Emily's mask had grown into fissures. She was unraveling, even as she tried desperately to hold her world together. But the truth about lies is simple: they never collapse quietly. They shatter with noise, and everyone hears. And that was exactly what I intended. The stage was set. The trap had been baited. All I needed was the right moment to turn the spotlight on her. It began at a friend's dinner party. We hadn't been out together in weeks, and when I suggested we attend, she hesitated. I could see the fear in her eyes. She was worried, not about me, but about what her lover might do, what messages might appear, what whispers might spread. But she couldn't refuse. Not without drawing suspicion. So she dressed carefully, painted her face into something resembling confidence, and slipped her hand into mine as we walked into the warmly lit house of our friends. From the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Smiles, polite laughter, the occasional squeeze of the hand. But beneath the surface, I could feel her pulse racing, her hand damp with sweat. The evening went smoothly at first. Wine flowed, stories were told, and the room buzzed with laughter. Emily tried to join in, but her eyes kept darting to her phone, hidden in her purse. She was waiting for a message, or dreading one. I knew it would come, because I had made sure of it. Her lover was already on edge, convinced she was mocking him, playing both sides. I had fueled his rage with carefully crafted lies, and tonight, I gave him the final push. From my own phone, disguised as her, I sent him a single message: "Don't text me tonight. My husband is suspicious." It was enough. Half an hour later, her phone buzzed violently on the table. Conversations faltered as the sharp vibration cut through the laughter. Emily froze, her hand hovering above her purse. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but curiosity or fear won. She opened the message, and her face went white. Everyone noticed. "Everything okay?" one of our friends asked lightly, sipping his wine. Emily forced a smile, nodding too quickly. "Yes, of course. Just work." But her trembling hands betrayed her. She slipped the phone back into her purse, but I caught the flash of words on the screen before she hid it. "I'm done. You're a liar. Stay away from me." Her lover had finally snapped. She was exposed, though no one else yet understood why. The spotlight was on her, even if the audience didn't know the play. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, watching her unravel. She laughed too loudly at jokes, poured herself another glass of wine too quickly, and barely touched her food. Her performance was cracking, and our friends were beginning to whisper, their eyes flicking between us. I stayed calm, even affectionate. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, smiled warmly, and told stories that made others laugh. I played the role of the devoted husband, and the contrast was glaring. Emily was falling apart beside me, and I was the picture of composure. That night, as we drove home in silence, I could feel the weight of the evening pressing down on her. She clutched her purse like it contained her last lifeline, her eyes staring blankly out the window. Finally, she whispered, Do you still love me?" I almost laughed. The question wasn't about love. It was about survival. She wanted to know if I was still blind enough to be manipulated. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch until she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Then I said softly, "Love is built on trust. Without it, love doesn't exist." She flinched as though struck. The spotlight was no longer just on her in my eyes, it was growing, spreading, preparing to expose her to the entire world, and she knew it. She just didn't know when it would happen. The house was silent that night. No television humming in the background, no clinking of glasses or rustle of pages. Just silence and the heavy sound of Emily's breathing as she paced the living room, her heels tapping nervously against the hardwood floor. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when. I sat in the armchair, calm, almost relaxed, a glass of whiskey in my hand. I watched her circle the room like a trapped animal, her eyes darting toward me every few seconds. Finally, she stopped. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly, almost pleading. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, studying it for a long moment before answering. "I'm thinking about truth." Her lips trembled. "Truth?" "Yes," I said, my voice even, measured. "The truth you've been hiding. The truth you whispered in the dark when you thought I was asleep. The truth you texted to someone else while sitting beside me in this very room." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to deny it, but no words came out. I leaned forward, setting the glass on the table. "I know, Emily. I've always known." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't." I cut her off sharply, though my tone never rose. "Don't insult me with lies. Not anymore. You've built your world out of them, and look where it's brought you. You've lost him, and soon, you'll lose me." Her hands shook as she reached out, as if to grab onto me, to tether herself to something solid. "Please," she whispered. "I made a mistake. I can fix it. We can fix this." But her words felt hollow, rehearsed, like all the others she'd spoken before. I stood, walking past her toward the window. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, cold and indifferent. "Do you know what betrayal feels like, Emily?" I asked, my back still turned. "It's not the act itself. It's the silence. The way you smiled at me, kissed me goodnight, while secretly belonging to someone else. That's the wound that never heals." She sobbed quietly, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt you," I turned then, meeting her tear-filled eyes. "But you did. And the thing about hurt is it changes people." Her knees seemed to give out as she collapsed onto the couch, clutching her face in her hands. "What are you going to do?" she asked through muffled sobs. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm going to leave you, Emily. Not in anger, in chaos, but in silence. The same silence you used to betray me." Her head shot up, panic flooding her face. "No, no, please. Don't." "I can't. You already did," I said, cutting her off again. "You made your choice long before tonight. And now, you'll live with it." I picked up my coat from the chair, sliding it over my shoulders. She scrambled to her feet, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was permanent. "You'll remember this," I said as I opened the door. "Every time you reach for someone, and they're not there. Every time silence fills the room, and you wonder who else knows your truth. That's your punishment, Emily. To live in the ruins of the world you created." Her sobs echoed behind me as I stepped out into the cool night air, the door closing softly between us. No yelling, no dramatic explosion, just silence, and in that silence, I found my freedom.